Yes.
Yes? Okay. Today's meeting is being filmed for live and subsequent broadcast by the way of the Council's internet site. The images and sound recording may also be used for training purposes within the Council. As you will see from the agenda papers, generally the public seating areas are not filmed. However, by entering the meeting room and using the public seating area, you are consenting to being filmed and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcast and or training purposes. Proposed public speakers have been made aware of the broadcast arrangements prior to the meeting. Will members please use their microphones to contribute to the meeting, and please remember to switch off the microphone when you are finished. Members dialing remotely, only turn your camera off for the duration. Can members please keep their cameras on through the duration of the meeting, so there is no comeback at the end. Also, could you ensure that you refrain from using any mobile devices during the committee and that the devices are on silent? Sorry for my mumbling. Do we have any apologies? Councillor Perkins, anyone else?
That's all, Chair.
Thank you. Do we have any declarations of interest?
Chair,
No?
do I need to make a declaration because one of the items is in my ward? I don't know. I've never had it before.
No, you're okay. As long as you've got no...
It's nothing to do with me whatsoever. I have no...
Okay then.
No.
All right. You should have all received the minutes of the meeting held on the 2nd of April. Can I please have somebody to acknowledge they're correct? Okay. And seconder? Okay. We now move on to item number 1, 24/0756. And this is being presented by Joanna Davison. Thank you, Joanne.
Thank you, Chair. A late representation report was issued on this item yesterday that hopefully you've all seen. This is a major residential scheme for affordable housing within the urban area and in a sustainable location. The site is seen hatched in blue on the plan. The site is previously developed land and will be a windfall site for housing during the local plan period. The site was formerly industrial, but is now cleared and vacant. So the top image is a historical aerial photo showing the previous industrial building on the site. And the bottom one is a historical street view image taken from Witham Street, again showing the street view image of the industrial buildings that used to be present on the site. The site is fenced, it's in poor condition, and it contributes little to the neighbouring environment or the street scene. So on these photos, you can see it's surrounded in palisade fencing, it's overgrown, it's quite prominent. Okay, so this is a more recent aerial image, and you'll see the site has now been cleared. It does have significant potential to bring urban regeneration in accordance with Strategic Policy SP18 of our adopted local development plan, which states that proposals will be favoured which assist the regeneration of the urban area, particularly where they contribute to the provision of residential opportunities within the urban area and the reuse of vacant, underused or derelict land. In short, the redevelopment is welcomed, it's positive, and having regard to site context, residential development is considered appropriate. Okay, so by way of background, you'll note from your reports that this site has history, with attempts to secure residential development on the site previously refused for reasons relating to design, scale, overdevelopment and flood risk. Pre-application discussions took place with officers prior to this current application being submitted, and the applicant and agent have engaged positively in this pre-application process, reducing the density of the scheme and altering its layout to respond to concerns raised early in the process. The pre-application version of the scheme, which you can see on the slide now, is detailed in the applicant's supporting information. And you'll see that this earlier version of the building is located adjacent to Witham Street, so is under my cursor, so it's that area here. And the building, as you can see from the elevation, was 3 stories, and it included 35 flats. Now, this arrangement met with several concerns from officers at pre-application stage, and has informed the scheme the committee will consider today. So, for example, officers expressed concern for the location of the multi-storey building opposite Witham Street properties, which are on the right of the image you can see. As well as the former industrial building was in this area of the site, the Fearing Street boundary has no residential properties directly opposite, and issues of overbearing effect, loss of light and privacy to existing residents would be better addressed by the building being on the southern side of the site. So again, back to this image, the pre-app showed the building in roughly the position of the industrial buildings opposite the Witham Street properties, but as you can see, this southern boundary of the site has no residential opposite. Now, this application is therefore for the construction of a building containing 30 apartments comprising of a mix of 8 2-beds and 22 1-beds, together with associated parking and external areas, with the building on the Fearing Street side of the site. It is also part 3-storey and part 2-storey, incorporating an important step down adjacent to the existing closest residence on Fearing Street. We have been advised that the proposed apartments would all be affordable, and a named registered social landlord will manage the accommodation. Okay, so I mentioned the step down. You can see it on this elevation. These are the plans being considered by committee today. So this is an image of the Fearing Street properties as they exist on the top left, and then the building with that step I mentioned. So if we go back to the site layout, the site is bounded by Witham Street, Kelvedon Street and Fearing Street. Neighbouring land uses are predominantly residential, with the exception of a small light industrial or commercial estate opposite it on Fearing Street, and a doctor's surgery and pharmacy to the east on Kelvedon Street. Okay. So the industrial estate is here under my cursor. The doctor's surgery is just here. If we look at a wider scale plan, Maindy and St Andrews primary schools are both located within an approximate 650 metre walk from the site, and on this image they're marked with blue dots. So you've got one sort of near the top left here, sorry my cursor's not very responsive, and then one sort of down towards the bottom right here. Corporation Road District Centre is approximately 110 metres walking distance of the site. The doctor's surgery and the pharmacy on Kelvedon Street are within a level 25 metre walk from the site, and there are a number of public open spaces in the area, including Lysetts Park, which is about 175 metres away, and that's marked with an orange dot. Hopefully you can see the orange dot. My cursor is not being very helpful. Roughly where my cursor is there. The site is also within 250 metres of the Riverside Cycle Path on the eastern bank of the River Usk, and that's marked by the green line you can see along the river there. Okay, so vehicle access to the site was originally from both Kelvedon Street and Fearin Street. You can probably just make out the gates on this existing plan here. So like I say, 2 accesses, and we've got pictures of those. So this is the Kelvedon Street access on the top and the Fearin Street access as they currently stand on the bottom. Both gated entrances, as you can see, are still visible. And on this application, a single vehicular access off Kelvedon Street is proposed. So in terms of scale, design and layout, all of the surrounding residential streets are 2-storey terraces. Given the predominance of smaller terraced houses, the residential density of the immediate area is high. The proposed layout would include the apartment building sited to the south of the site, fronting Fearin Street, and side on with number 59 Fearin Street, which you can see on that image. Vehicle access would be via a ramp from Kelvedon Street, leading to a raised parking area accommodating 30 parking spaces. To the northwest of the site would be a communal amenity area to include landscaping and paving. The apartment building would measure approximately 48 metres in length, 18 metres in depth and 10.5 metres in height, but importantly, as I previously mentioned, it will step down on its northwestern end to a maximum of 2-storey height, with a further 5-metre buffer between the building and number 59 Fearin Street. A flat roof with a mansard design is proposed, and the top floor would be clad with a dark metal cladding system. The facade of the building would feature projecting balconies, which, along with a variation in materials, namely a brick plinth, white render, metal cladding for the roof, would break up the expanse of the building facade and add architectural articulation. Windows will be grey powder coated aluminium to complement the vertical cladding to the upper floor. If the design looks familiar to some members, you may be aware that a similar design of building was approved by Planning Committee a few years ago now at Crawford Street, which is in the St Julian's ward. So solar panels are proposed on top of the flat roof of the building, but these will not be visually dominant from public vantage points. The render as well, I should mention, is silicone based, which is self-cleaning and does not suffer from the staining associated with cement-based renders. Full details of materials have been provided as per the late representation report that we issued yesterday. So the site is currently an overgrown, palisade fence-enclosed, derelict industrial site. Officers consider the scheme will have an acceptable impact upon the appearance and character of the area, and subsequently accord with policies GP2 of the LDP and support the aims of policy SP1, SP18 and SP10. The images you're looking at here obviously are artist's impressions. This is effectively the rear of the building. It's showing the ramped access to the parking area and the bin store, which I'll come on to in a sec. Okay, so turning to residential amenity, due to the requirement to raise the site levels to manage flood risk, retaining walls are required to the rear, and the vehicular access to the parking area would need to be ramped off Kelvedon Street. Now, no retaining walls are required to the front of the site along Fearin Street, as elevated finished floor levels will be incorporated into the building. The pavement level of Witham Street is shown to be around 6.9 metres AOD, and the car park level is 7.7 metres AOD. So the difference between the elevated parking area and the neighbouring pavement on Witham Street is about 800 metres. So this diagram is helpfully showing us this. So we've got under my cursor now, we've got a section taken through the site, Fearin Street on the left, Witham Street on the right. You can see that elevated level coming through the site. Here, the elevated parking area here. And the applicant has given us two sort of more in detail sections that are the boxes you can see on either end. And they're what you can see on these bottom more detailed sections. So on the left, the section with Fearing Street. So the elevated finished floor level will be incorporated into the building design. On the right-hand side, Witham Street will have the elevated car park, a relatively small retaining wall with an Armco barrier disguised or screened by a fence. So the overall height of the fence from the pavement is about 1.8 metres, so nothing unusual there, and certainly no more so than the current palisade fence, which of course is right on the back edge of the pavement at present. So in between the new fence and retaining wall and the back edge of pavement, we'll have a relatively small embankment that the applicants propose to plant hedgerow along. Okay, so the ramped vehicular access, which you can see on the top right section of Kelvedon Street. You will see that as you approach from Willenhall Street, but with the footpath at Kelvedon Street being about 7.15 metres AOD and the elevated car park being 7.72 metres AOD, it's less than 600 mil higher than the existing pavement. So officers consider this will not represent an unduly imposing feature in the wider context, and remember they're doing it to mitigate flood risk. Areas of soft landscaping and banked verge along Witham Street with hedging will facilitate a generally much greener and much less industrial looking site. In terms of other boundary treatments, 1100 mil high powder coated metal bow topped railings are indicated to the front boundary with Fearing Street and to part of the Kelvedon Street frontage, continuing around the corner to part of Witham Street. This is welcomed to define defensible space forming part of the proposals and will offer an attractive form of boundary treatment compared to the existing palisade fencing. In terms of residential amenity, again, all flats will have the benefit of a private balcony, and the back of the building will be at least 30 metres distance from the front elevations of the Witham Street properties. So in excess, well in excess, of the normal 21 metre expectation to maintain privacy. The balconies will be recessed, so they will not offer side-facing views. All apartments will meet or actually exceed the internal space standards in our adopted supplementary planning guidance. This one is just a slightly closer up image showing the apartment layouts, which are similar on all floors but not absolutely identical. You can see the enclosed balconies on the top and bottom of this floor plan. Like I say, they're recessed balconies, so they don't offer side-facing views. Outdoor communal space for future residents does actually fall short of area guidelines in the adopted SPG, but is provided, which is not always feasible on inner urban sites such as this, and it is therefore welcomed. We know the site is located in a sustainable location within walking distance access along Witham Street and Fearing Street to the Riverside Walkway and the associated recreational riverside environment, as well as public open space along Corporation Road. The shortfall in on-site open space in this case is not reason to refuse permission in officer view, and a pleasant on-site outdoor landscape space will be an asset to future residents and enhance visual amenity for the wider community. A communal bin store is proposed close to Witham Street. So I'll put my cursor on that now. It is accessible for bin collection. Residents can access the bin store via a dedicated footpath from the rear door of the building and via the car park and a few steps. This arrangement is not uncommon for flatted blocks, and officers consider it acceptable. A cycle store is proposed to the side of the apartment building. Under my cursor now. That's approximately 4 metres away from the side boundary of the garden serving number 59 Fearin Street. Now, the cycle store would only be 2.1 metres in height with a flat roof, and this structure is not considered to result in an adverse impact to the privacy or amenity of the occupants of number 59. In visual terms, the buildings are modest in their size and their design, and they're considered acceptable. So you're looking on the top there at the bin store and on the bottom at the cycle store. So the proposals would comply with the usual light tests in relation to its impact upon number 59 Fearin Street, which is, of course, the closest residential property to it. And this relationship is considered to be acceptable. The proposed apartment building would be sited to the southeast of number 59 and subsequently will give rise to some potential shading, more obvious perhaps during the winter months. But having regard to the stepped buffer between the two buildings and the step down in the storey height closest to Fearin Street, any demonstrable adverse effect of the new building in terms of shading to the nearest residential neighbour is considered to be mitigated. 3 windows are proposed in the side elevation of the new building, adjacent to number 59. You can see them on the slide, and there's one on each floor. The windows would serve the communal hallways. I think they're required for fire safety purposes, but it is considered that a condition requiring the windows to be obscure glazed is warranted in the interests of neighbouring amenity. The relationship to number 56 Witham Street, which is the other property on the northern side of the site, under my cursor now, is different. So a communal amenity space is proposed directly to the side of it, which will be for the benefit of future occupants of the site. There are windows in the side elevation of 56 Witham Street. You can see them on the bottom left there, which are orientated directly towards the amenity space, 1 at ground floor, 2 at first floor. These windows are not original. They've actually been installed within the last 5 years. Possibly since the demolition of the neighbouring industrial units, which you can see on the top right. Now, at present, the windows face the derelict site, with the boundary of the site being the gable wall of the existing property. And they would have been installed with full knowledge of this relationship and the associated risks of future development. Windows installed appear to open out over the site, which may raise civil issues for the applicant to consider. Notwithstanding, the on-site space here will remain open, so there is no risk of overbearing impact. In terms of privacy, these windows have been installed facing a derelict site where future change to layout and character should be expected, with privacy expectations reasonably more limited, particularly for the ground floor window. Officers consider that policy GP2 of the adopted local development plan is met. Okay, turning to parking. The 30 parking spaces proposed equate to 1 space per apartment. The adopted parking SPG allows for a reduction in parking provision to 1 space where it can be demonstrated that the site is sustainable. The Council's highway officer raises no objection. A parking survey has also been provided to show that the 6 visitor parking spaces expected by the SPG can be accommodated on street at various times, albeit officers understand that on-road parking is in high demand during some parts of the day. The fact there is no technical objection, the resident parking accords with adopted SPG, and the site is located within a highly sustainable location are all factors that must be given substantial weight. ensure officers consider that in parking terms the proposal is acceptable. Vehicular access will be off Kelvedon Street, as I've mentioned. The access position is close but not identical to the position of the existing access off Kelvedon Street and is acceptable in highway safety terms. Conditions to secure the closure of the existing accesses is recommended. So turning to flood risk, the site is located in an area at risk of flooding and it's within a defended zone. A flood consequences assessment has been submitted and officers have considered both the original TAN 15 document and the new updated version, giving primary weight in this particular case to the original version of the TAN. Both the old and new TAN 15 classify residential development as highly vulnerable. Development must only be located in flood risk areas if it is justified, and in this case officers consider the justification test is met. Natural Resources Wales has reviewed the flood consequence assessment accompanying the application and advised that it shows that the risks and consequences could be managed to an acceptable level. The site would currently flood in both, so in its current condition, would flood in both the 1 in 200 and 1 in 1,000 year events. And in order to mitigate the predicted flood risk on site, the proposal will have finished internal ground floor levels of 8 metres AOD and 7.7 metres AOD finished level in the car parking area. This means the accommodation and the parking area will be flood-free during the 1 in 200 year event, with climate change factored in, and complies with TAN 15. In the extreme 1 in 1,000 year event, the site is predicted to flood to a maximum depth of 310 millimetres for the residential areas and 590 millimetres for the car parking area. These flood levels remain within the tolerable limits set out within TAN 15, as they're less than 600 mil or wade in depth. Now, officers are satisfied, having evaluated the acceptability tests in the TAN, as per your reports, that the consequences of flooding can be safely managed in this case and the development will not impact flood risk elsewhere. So noting the lack of objection as well from Natural Resources Wales, the scheme is considered compatible with policies SP1 and SP3 of the Local Development Plan. On other matters, Natural Resources Wales recommends that a Kemp condition should be included, and this forms part of the condition lists in your report. Provided the development is carried out in accordance with the conditions, NRW do not consider that it will adversely affect the integrity of the River Usk Special Area of Conservation, and officers agree. The NCC ecologist also raises no objection, and both he and the landscape officer welcome the submission of supporting information, such as the Green Infrastructure Statement and the preliminary ecological appraisal. The tree officer has raised concerns on the impact of development upon 2 street trees at Witham Street and Fearin Street. The trees are to be retained, but the council's tree officer objects on the basis of the proposed development being too close to these trees. These trees are not the subject of a tree preservation order. Now, T1, so I've included the plans here that you've actually got in your report on the left and some photos on the right. T1 is affected by the building, so that is the one on the top slide, the bottom slide on Fearin Street, and T3 is affected by the car park on the Witham Street side. These images are, I think, on page 38 of your reports. The red area shows where the root protection areas would be directly impacted or damaged by proposed excavation or construction of foundations. This is a very small area, as you can see, of the overall root protection areas, and there is no reason to believe that the encroachment will lead to the loss of the trees. However, in the case of the Fearin Street tree on the bottom slide, there is likely to be pressure to reduce the tree by reason of potential above-ground conflict of branches with the windows of the new building. But the tree on Witham Street will be able to mature next to the parking area with less pressure for cutting back. The landscaping scheme includes 15 additional trees to be planted around the site, as well as new hedging. On balance, having regard to the significant merits of the proposals that have already presented, this impact upon existing trees is not considered to weigh so heavily against the scheme as to warrant a reason to refuse. Matters such as drainage and noise are not significant impediments to development in this case and have been covered in the officer report, and the need for Section 106 is also explained in full and is required to safeguard the Council's position. Officers recommend permission be granted, subject to the conditions cited in your reports and updated by the late representation report, and subject to a legal agreement. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I know there's no public speakers, so I'll open the item up to any questions. Councillor Orton.
Right, thank you, Chair. As I mentioned earlier, obviously this is in my ward. I know the site quite well, and I think it will be it's an excellent opportunity to develop a piece of land which is just derelict and nothing is happening with it. So I think the suggestion to move the building is a very sensible one, due to the proximity of the other houses. And on the whole, I can't see, with my limited knowledge, anything that's particularly wrong with it. I think it's a very good use of the land. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody with their hands up in the chamber, please?
Not sure it's on, Councillor.
Sorry. Councillor Linden, you want to speak?
Yeah, he is just trying to sort his microphone out, Chair.
Got it now. Thanks, Chair. Looking at the aesthetics, you mentioned about the K-rend being silicone based. It still gets dirty, it can, with metal clad above as well. Remind me what the maintenance regime would be on if the cladding gets dirty. Is it every 2 years, 5 years?
I'm no expert on that, I'll be honest. I mean, the applicant has given us a full schedule of the materials at our request. It's positive that it's not the cement-based render, because there has been some issues with that. And obviously it's in the registered social landlord's own interest to limit the maintenance burden from a financial point of view. So they've selected this silicone-based render, but it's not the only finishing material, of course. I don't know what the maintenance regime would be. It's something that we can seek out if it's particularly important. I appreciate the robustness of materials on a scheme like this is, but I can't answer the question in terms of exactly what they're going to do to maintain it.
I would like to hold up the building. It's I would imagine, as the local candidate says, it's very welcome for in the area and for the unsightly land it is. But I'd like to see something. I don't know whether we can ask them for every 5 years, or if it gets to a dirty extent, to clean the facade, because I know these are prone to getting dirty and staining.
Yeah, there's a couple of possible options with this. I mean, the applicant is very cooperative. They have been from the start, as I mentioned in the background when I started my presentation. I'm sure they'd be more than willing to give us a maintenance schedule in liaison with the registered social landlord. Worst case scenario, I suppose, is that we do have enforcement powers through Section 215, untidy or unsightly land. But obviously that would be worst case.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of conditions listed in the published agenda. We had planned to remove the materials condition, as per the late representation report, because we have the details now, and we were just going to condition that as part of the plan's condition 01. If members feel particularly strongly about the maintenance point, I can't see the applicant being objection or have an objection to one of the conditions being revised or a new condition added to request that information.
Thank you. Yeah, just a thought that you see these buildings around the facades look terrible, so we just don't want it to be. And people are complaining at the minute with parking, or they don't want this unsightly facade in front of their windows. Then, okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions?
Councillor Watkins has got his hand up, Chair.
I should have known. Sorry, Councillor Watkins.
It's the chairs, they're down too low. A number of questions for the officer. Affordable housing social landlord. I notice it says Newport City Homes. That's no longer, isn't it? But does Headed agree with what we're doing in regards to the development?
Yes, they'll be aware.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. The other thing is, you mentioned about visitors parking. There's none actually on site, so they're adjacent on the road, I'm assuming. But I noticed on one of the plans which you put up, it was double yellow lines all the way around the development. Is that what's going to happen, or is that in being at the moment?
There are some double arrow lines existing. Perhaps I'll go back to my presentation and share some of those slides.
Well, it does show cars parked
I can
around the
jump in and
site.
help with that one if you like. There's pretty much open parking down around there because of the doctor's surgery and the pharmacy.
Yeah, I can come in there and help you answer that, Joanne. I'm a member of the doctor's surgery, and there are ample parking spaces around that area, down around the surgery and Calverton Street.
Thank you very much, all. Yeah, there is some double yellow lines, but obviously there is a fair amount of resident parking that occurs on Witham and Fearing Street. Yeah, I think this is where you've picked it up. Yeah, okay. This is an artist's impression. Let's look at the actual aerial or the actual photos.
Is that okay, Councillor Watkins?
Yeah. So, yeah, the aerial, I know it's not the clearest, but this certainly is on-road parking available. I can confirm.
Okay, the other thing was, are the car parking spaces going to be allocated to each individual property?
I don't know, and to be honest, I don't think we're concerned about that happening. The registered social landlord may decide to do that, but I don't think, from our perspective, that would be a concern for us.
Right, so there's no allocation for disabled parking on there, I've noticed. So, because if there is a disabled parking bay, it means that the other bays are going to be reduced in numbers.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of 30, you could end up with 29, 28, and so on.
Yeah.
If it's disabled parking.
Well, this plan is the layout and will be conditions via condition 1. There has been a little bit of to-in and fro-in on the layout, and there's actually a degree of inbuilt space in the car park. There's a little bit of wriggle room there to possibly adjust some of the size of a couple of those bays. But certainly this is the scheme they've asked us to agree. You're quite right, they all look the same size. I can't see any that are wider for disability purposes, but there is some wriggle room there. So Yeah, I mean 30 spaces is what we're conditioning.
Okay. The other question is what reinforcement is going to be put on the wall adjacent to the footpath in Witham Street, where the cars are raised above the footpath? Is there going to be any, I'm going to say, not just a double brick wall, are there going to be metal stanchions to stop vehicles going through the wall onto the public footpath? That's what I'm concerned about.
Okay, so there is a setback. So we've got a verge, which we don't currently have. So we're going to have that verge. Then we're going to have a relatively low retaining wall. Let's go back to the section, if I can. Yeah. Okay, yeah, here we go. So bottom right. So we've got a relatively shallow retaining wall, and on top of that they're going to put an Armco barrier to prevent vehicles driving over the top. But because they're not particularly pretty, they're going to put a hidden miss fence then along the boundary. So residents of Witham Street, those using the pavement, will see the hit and miss fence.
Question, and that is the footpath along that side. If you could go to the floor plan again, please. That one there. Well, that one there. On Fearing Street, it shows the public footpath joining all the way along. On Fearing Street, it doesn't. Is there any particular reason why that footpath is not accommodated all the way along to the following one? So it means technically that people will have to walk in the road in Witham Street to carry on up Witham Street.
All right, I think I understand.
Probably help with that one. Sorry, Chair, I can probably help with that one again as well, if you like. It's the turning circle, it is, Trevor. There's a barrier preventing any further travel down the road, so it's a little bit wider for the cars to turn around.
Yeah.
That's where the pavement ends.
Yeah. I think we may have a photo of that somewhere, which I'm trying to get to. Not the best. So let's look at the. Oh, hang on. It's not entirely clear there, but the aerial should show it.
So pedestrians will have to cross the road to continue walking in a safe manner.
It's the existing situation, and it's outside the site. So it's it's the current arrangement.
It's about a 3-metre section, Councillor, with a narrow pavement of about 30-40 centimetres. It's
also a dead end. So both Fearing and Witham Street have those blocks. Again, roughly where the trees are, the street trees are that we discussed. The roads are actually blocked, so they're not through routes.
But Fearing Street actually shows a footpath continuing along.
As per existing, yes, that is the existing situation. But Witham Street, as Councillor Horton mentioned, has something akin to a turning circle.
Okay, lovely. Thank you, Chair.
I'll come in there, and where the dead end parts are, Councillor Watkins, I'm not sure whether you can walk past either side, but if you can't, there is a pavement across the where they built the tree thing is, and you can walk across safely without having to cross a road. Sorry. Anything further, Councillor Watkins?
No, thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Chair. Just to speak in favour of the application, to be honest, I mean, there's been a few good points raised this morning, and obviously in the report as well, there's quite a long list of resident objections But I think every planning application we look at is a balancing act, isn't it, between the pros and the cons. When you look at the social housing needs for the city, desperate needs for social housing, and then you look at the conditions that have been applied to the application, assuming that we do pass this morning, I think a lot of those conditions do deal with most of the objections. There's always going to be a little bit of issue with parking with
Sorry, Councillor Reynolds, you cut out then halfway through for those in the chamber. Could you repeat that, please?
Oh dear.
The last thing we heard was you were talking about the conditions, dealt with a lot of the objections. That's what we got to. Thank you.
Right, okay, sorry, apologies for that. Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just saying that when you look at it overall, when you balance the pros and the cons, I think the need for housing and potential housing, you'll far outweigh some of the objections or problems that might arise from this in terms of your parking and trees and so on. I think the conditions that have been applied by the officers do deal with the vast majority of those objections, and the need for housing, I think, far outweighs those issues. So I'm just basically speaking in favour of the application.
Okay, thank you. I see there's no further hands raised, so can we go on to the recommendation and decision, please? The recommendation is that we accept with conditions. Can I please have somebody to nominate? Councillor Howells, second. Councillor Reynolds. All those in favour, please raise their hands. Okay, thank you. That's passed unanimously. One further thing on the agenda, I believe, is enforcement. Does anybody have any questions on that? No? Okay. Thank you all for the attendance, and I shall see you at the next meeting. Bye now.
Thanks, Chair.